Do you agree with Harbaugh's plan?
Yeah, Coach is right about this, and I know there are people out there who are thinking he has ulterior motives. Somehow this is going to help him beat Ohio State. No, he's right about this. Look, the college football and the NFL have a symbiotic relationship, or else you could even say they act as a syndicate. What do I mean by this? Think about eligibility now for the draft. You need to be out of high school for 3 years, and you have to have your eligibility used up by what? The next season, right? Why? That helps college. So that's the NFL putting in rules that say college has to be able to juice all of your eligibility, basically, just about all of it, before you can go to the NFL. I know there are businesses that say, hey, you need a college degree. You need X amount of years of school, and that's their prerogative, right? Except is that what this is really about? And I understand also that NFL, tackle football, this is not like, especially the highest league in the world, this is not like basketball or baseball or other kinds of sports. This is grown man business, and you want those kids to really be, physically prepared as well as mentally and emotionally prepared for the NFL, and I can appreciate that. Why are the rules in place like that? Because the owners know you take away those rules, right? And too many of them will be tempted to grab a hot prospect, before they're really ready, and and there's also nothing wrong with that, with the idea that a business is going to put in place rules that prevent them from being incentivized to do what's in their best short-term interest at the expense of their long-term interest. So I understand all of that, but Coach is right. If someone's ready to play, they should be able to play. Let's strip all that away and make it basic. If they're ready to play, they should be able to play. The NFL doesn't owe college anything in terms of them acting in a syndicate and one helping the other. The NFL needs to mind its business and doesn't need to prevent kids from making a living by ensuring that college has its supply of players, even though it's a star-making vehicle for the NFL. They don't have to do that. And if a kid enters the draft but never actually is a professional, why is his eligibility shot? It doesn't make sense. Harbaugh's right. He's making it rational.
Well, I agree with everything that you said about kids' eligibility being shot. That makes no sense whatsoever. But I am of the mindset that specifically when it comes to football, because of the violence that it entails, I think those developmental years prior to getting to the elite level is necessary. And I'm of the mindset it may not need to be 3 years like it is now, but I don't mind a kid having to wait until he completes his sophomore season on the collegiate level in terms of football before entering the NFL draft. Football is an incredibly violent sport. I understand there are sports like the UFC and boxing and what have you. You can enter 17, 18 years of age, get in the ring or the square or the octagon and do your thing. I understand all of that. But football, when you consider the men that play in this game, mortgages to pay, children to take care of, families to provide for. There's an elevated level of seriousness that we simply can't ignore. And when so much is contingent upon others doing their jobs, it's not just about you and what development is necessary physically, but it's also mentally and emotionally as well. The NFL can be very complicated. It's not the most simplistic thing in the world. Understanding the playbook, understanding not just your job, but the jobs of other people, all the responsibilities that come along with it, not to mention being in that situation, again, where you're going to make the money that you're going to make. I'm not trying to hold up anybody from making money. Please don't get me wrong. But the NFL is an entirely different beast than the NBA and other sports. It's so taxing physically. It ultimately becomes taxing mentally and emotionally. It's incredibly violent, and one injury could cost you a career. I think those early developmental stages, the freshman and sophomore year, I think it's important enough. I don't have a problem with football taking that position, but that's all. I agree with everything else Harbaugh said, but I certainly am not of the mindset that a kid is a star in high school and then you know what? Welcome to the NFL. Nah, not when it comes to football. I'm not down.
Don't draft them.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Stephen A. That it's a much different game than baseball or basketball, and when you break it down this way, it's not uniform across all positions that all players should be, or rather would be able to go ahead and make the jump after their first or maybe even their second year from college to the pros. And what I mean by that is this. Look, big men, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, I can tell you this, by and large, most of them are not ready to come to the NFL and deal with the physicality and the mindset of players who play in the trenches. They're just not ready. It could be something that could put them in harm's way, or rather, let's just say they're probably underperformed from a physical perspective, and then mentally, I'm just telling you this, it's a grown man's game down there in the trenches, and I don't know, some players may never recover from the kind of butt whooping they would take. Now, when you're talking about skilled players, perimeter players, running backs, wide receivers, it's much different. Look, I think when Bo Jackson and Herschel Walker were freshmen, I think right away people knew, look, you can go to the NFL right now, and you're probably going to be a 1,500-yard rusher. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure there's many running backs in today's game that would say, please let me go to the NFL after my freshman year, because they're holding it against me the longer I stay in college and the more mileage I do put on myself. So I think it's a tricky situation depending upon the positions. And then from a mental perspective, you're right, Stephen A. Look, when I was 18, 19 years old, freshman, sophomore in college, I promise you I wasn't ready to come to the NFL and deal with the kinds of players in the locker room that I would have had to have dealt with from a maturity perspective. I promise you I wasn't ready. So that's something you also have to factor in. As far as eligibility being used up once you declare and then not being allowed to go back, I don't think that's very fair either, because I'll tell you this, players oftentimes are making decisions, and Mike Tannenbaum alluded to this earlier this morning. Players oftentimes are making decisions based on what the committee says, although the committee doesn't have all the information on those players, specifically from a medical and character perspective. So yeah, they're projecting, but they don't really have the entire picture. So you're trying to make a decision about whether or not to go out in the draft based off of someone who doesn't have the entire picture on you. Then you don't get drafted. Now you can't go back? Well, I understand, and Laura has articulated this beautifully all morning long about the concerns that college coaches and administrators have about, how do we then, plan from a scholarship perspective when we don't, if players are coming back who still have remaining eligibility, how do we plan for that? Well, I understand that that's a challenge right there, but I do think players should have the ability to come back to college. If they can't go back to the school they just left, then go ahead and enter the transfer portal and go somewhere else.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.